anybody see a second mic on the, no, on the C thing? All right, fair enough. I have to apologize for skipping introductions. So maybe the mic where's the mic now? So let's start over there. And if you could just say a brief word about who you are and the role you are currently playing and your connection to the smart contract space.
Great, so thank you, Zach, and thanks for George and everyone for having us here. My name is Zach Ziliak. It's actually one L, but who's counting? I lead a small team of attorneys here in Chicago. We started out 5 years ago focusing on the trading and investment management space, and that led naturally with the recent explosion of cryptocurrencies and so on into representing companies that are trading cryptocurrencies and ICO tokens, as well as entities that are raising money through ICOs. A little less work with, let's say, traditional companies looking to add blockchain to their architecture, but we are exposed to a lot of cryptocurrency and blockchain work. Some smart contracts, more of our companies are saying we really want to do X with smart contracts as soon as we raise some money. I'd like to see more of them actually get to that next level because it is central to a lot of their value propositions. And I love the definition you just gave there. I hadn't heard that sort of object-oriented approach to it. I think it's a great way to look at smart contracts. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm Li Shigen. You can also know as Steve Li. I'm from China and I'm now regional head of NAM China. So earlier my colleague Alex has did a keynote about what NAM is and how NAM's smart contract is empowering all the business all over the world. So my connection to the smart contract is that NAM also has its own understanding of how should smart contract and plugins be built on the blockchain. So it's not always the easier way. We have choices and we can make the right choice, I think. Thank you.
First of all, thanks organizers that they invite me to this great event. My name is Nick. I am from Ukraine, big Ukraine company Alex. And I arrived here as a part of a group which include our head of business and blockchain analyst. They arrived with me and feel free to communicate with our group. So I am architect and lead the real projects in the Ukraine for foreign customers such as Standard & Poor's agency, a big England media group, and we have the real project using the Hyperledger, and also we have pre-sales in Germany and for Japan. So we use smart contracts for business to build private networks and add value to their business. So.
Hi, I'm Will Turner. I'm a partner at Barnes & Thornburg, which is a AmLaw 100 law firm. I have a securities law background, and I represent a number of issuers, investors, and traders in tokens. My experience with smart contracts is through my clients' experiences, sometimes on the positive side and sometimes on the negative side when contracts don't operate the way that they're intended.
Thank you, Zach, and thank you, George, for having me. I'm Daniel Riddell. I'm an advisor to the Decent Foundation. Decent is a blockchain protocol, delegated proof-of-stake blockchain protocol. We launched our mainnet in July of last year, and our blockchain is specifically focused at digital content distribution. So utilizing our blockchain, you can transact securely any type of digital content that could exist on your computer. So it has implications across many different industry verticals, and I'm very excited about the future of smart contracts. With Decent, our smart contract platform is hard-coded for reasons of efficiency and scale. If there are partners who are interested in using Decent blockchain for their own specific use cases, we do have the ability to alter the code at the source code level and adapt custom smart contracts for your needs.
Thank you all for those introductions. And I am sort of thinking, we're talking about the future of smart contracts, 2030. Before we look some 10 plus years into the future though, let's talk a little bit about the present. And what I would like you to think about and talk about is what do you see today in the smart contract world that is particularly exciting to you? Is there an example of a project that you're either working on or that you have seen clients or just about anyone implement that you're saying, okay, this is the direction that smart contracts are going, and I'm excited to be part of this? And I do have to once again apologize, you'll have to share the mic. So.
Sure, I guess I'll speak first then. I'm very excited about smart contracts, specifically within the media and entertainment space. Today, as you saw earlier in the presentations, there are big players like Netflix, like YouTube, who are really controlling the content distribution space at this point. I also work as CTO for a children's entertainment service, so I'm very familiar with content licensing and distribution and all of these different types of things. Really, when we're talking about entertainment and content, I still believe that content is king. However, we've gotten away from that in today's distribution model. Companies like Netflix really do hold the trump card when it comes to negotiating with their producers. And this is because there's a complete lack of transparency on how their content is engaged on these types of platforms. So by utilizing smart contracts and protocols like the DCENT protocol, we can create an ecosystem whereby content creators and publishers have the ability to transparently publish their content directly to consumers via dApps, have meaningful metrics and analytics on how their content is engaged, settle these transactions in real time, and make better informed decisions on how they're going to create the best content for their audiences in the future. So, you know, I'm kind of leaning towards the media and entertainment side of things, but there are many, many different use cases.
So I would say my experience to date is involved in transactions which exchange values, so tokens for fiat or tokens for tokens. My expectation is that in the near future, one of the positive developments would be the use of smart contracts to create efficiencies around what I call smaller transactions that are transactions that can't be transacted efficiently through the use of counsel. The code enables the transactors to get over trust issues that either create problems to transacting on the front end or create incentives to, as an attorney, I would describe as a breach of contract in the performance of the agreement.
If we talk about the present time, my experience with smart contracts is that we already is ready to use such simple smart contracts as storage data in the blockchain, restrict access to that data, sell and buy data in the blockchain smart contracts, and also we using in our projects the store big large data in the IPFS system and integrate blockchain with other systems.
I think for present, nowadays, most of the use case in smart contracts are using for ICOs and raising funds. But for them, we have really wide partnership with all different kinds of companies. So mostly we, besides finance use case, we focus on things like anti-fake tracing and the supply chains. These are all using NEM technology to do certification on that, and we use NEM smart contract to power them. So this use case, I think they are outside the traditional finance use case, and it's really been a great use case for the smart contract.
Thank you.
So let's see, in the very near future, I'm excited about the use of smart contracts in relation to real estate contracts, real estate transactions, because they check a lot of boxes for me. I'm thinking these are multiple parties involved in a transaction who typically will only involve each other one time, so there's no time to develop a trust relationship. And it's a pretty standardized contract, but right now a lot of money has to sit in escrow and so on, so there's a great opportunity to reduce transaction costs, reduce just the intermediation that is required right now. I say near future, however, because I think some more work needs to be done to make a blockchain record of title be the official title so that we can have that last.
So I think the biggest obstacle at this point is the interpretation of legal parameters in code. So basically, when you're developing a smart contract, if it's sensitive matter, you should have the lawyers in the room, and lawyers and engineers generally don't speak the same language. So we had an instance where I met a fellow in Hong Kong, and he'd actually litigated the first smart contract in a Commonwealth court. And basically, there were two parties, and these two parties had what they thought was contractual agreement in a traditional case agreement. And then the engineers went in and they developed this as a set of smart contract code. But the parties weren't happy with the outcome of the smart contract code. There was a dispute. And the judge actually ruled in favor of the smart contract code because it's not subject to interpretation. It's not subject to language interpretation. So when code executes on a computer, it's ultimately true or false, yes or no. So the most important step in developing these smart contracts is getting the good legal counsel and having a solid understanding of what you're developing in code, and then thorough review of that. And the biggest obstacle today is the efficient means of doing that, I think.
Yeah, so since I've come from China, I'll say something more specific in China of what we are facing, the obstacles. So the first obstacle is that the government don't have specific regulatory in this area at all. So whenever we do smart contract in the real business, we are not quite sure about whether the government will be okay with that. Since sometimes it's like the Chinese government, they already said no to SAO at all. So it's among the few countries of our world. And also, in the coin world or in the blockchain world in China, people lack of consensus at all. So in the north of China, most companies and the governments, they promote blockchain without coin. So it's like kind of like the blockchain technology itself matters. In the south of China, most people concentrate on token economics, which is mostly focused on the utility coin and how it should reshape the economic. So I think all these are obstacles that we are facing to form a more better unified economy of the smart contract. So regarding that, NAM is making their own effort, working with the government and also lawyers in China to do our best to make the consensus and to help the regulatory, help the government to understand more about blockchain and why with or without a coin, the blockchain technology is a great technology. Yeah.
So in other words, there are questions as to how regulatory bodies will treat smart contracts in execution, and perhaps questions as to how these contracts, to your point, Daniel, might be construed in a courtroom. Those would seem to be fairly significant barriers. Right?
Yeah, right. Thank you.
I can add a few things. 2 years before, it was very difficult to use blockchain. It was a very new technology, and many cases I can't implement. But just now, after 2 years, we have more tools to easily develop any idea, to develop the smart contracts. Just now it's much more easily, and we have a lot of tools. But what I see the restriction to use smart contracts is the technology. We still wait for new frameworks. We wait that frameworks must be more complex, and we need. This is on the restriction, the technology. If we will have enough functionality of technology, we can implement any smart contracts. So, and in our company, we have many of use cases. The customers come to us with many ideas. So we have many ideas, and we are starting from the simple smart contracts, which is very stable and which work. I understand after years and years working with Exchange, Afterbots, standalone programs. So I understand that smart contracts is a standalone program, and when you run it, it must work very stable. So.
And going back to your point, Daniel, you mentioned that smart contracts are by necessity code. And yet, I am wondering, do you see the eventual refinement of tools that will sort of bridge the gap between traditional contract language and code? In other words, or is the future going to be that there are those attorneys who understand code who can thereby read and interpret smart contracts for their clients, and are there going to be attorneys who are sort of left in the dust because they never learned how to run through code line by line?
Yeah, I mean, I think the future is definitely promising for smart contracts. The difference between really the age that we're in now and the age that's coming with smart contracts lies in the protocol layers. So today we engage digital services primarily through HTTP protocol, the web protocol, and this protocol is very thin, okay? So there's not a lot of parameters involved at the protocol layer, and lots of things are subject to interpretation and implementation at the application layer. Web 3.0 is completely different. It flips that pyramid, and it creates a thick protocol layer so that developers can write more lean applications on this in-depth protocol and have a more cohesive and integratable system in the long run. So I think that now is the time that the legal minds need to be working with the technical minds in order to develop the best protocols. And once these protocols are solidified, I think the integration of smart contracts in society is going to happen very rapidly. It's going to happen much more rapidly than we saw with Web 2.0 adoption and the explosion of the internet.
Gotcha. Can we get a little nerdy here and talk about the specific protocols that you see as being the most promising right now? Whether it's a protocol or the smart contract development framework, I think the go-to language here is Solidity, right? Is that going to maintain its sort of dominance in the smart contract space, or are we going to see the growth
I mean,
of other
like
tools?
with Solidity, we see, that's the major language involved in programming Ethereum blockchain. With Decent, we've taken a step back and we've created a set of APIs which really are integratable in any programming language. They work off WebSocket. You know, any developer can take this and do a Python development or a JavaScript development and utilize the blockchain. So I don't think it's so much at the language level that we're going to see the barrier. I think that the most widely adopted smart contract platforms in the future are going to be the ones that are the most scalable and have the best consensus models behind them. Consensus is key to efficiency and scale when you're talking blockchain. And if you're doing a proof of work consensus like they're doing with Ethereum, you just simply can't scale today, okay? There's far too much consumer demand to use the platform than there is computing resources to process the transactions. So with Decent, we're a democratic protocol. We're DPoS, delegated proof of stake, which means that token holders within our ecosystem have the ability to vote for community things that they consider important. They have the ability to vote for who mines and validates the transactions. And it's very similar to a corporate equity model whereby shareholders vote for their board of directors. Okay, so if you're a DCT token holder, you are able to vote with that DCT token on any of the things that the community does. And it's important that the smart contract platform that you choose for your development has the ability to scale in the future. We saw
function at a relatively early age than it would be for a non-DLT company. So it'd be very unusual, I think, to see an in-house counsel for a startup that has, say, 10 employees outside of the DLT space. I wouldn't necessarily consider that unusual in the DLT space. So there's certainly a number of examples of technology companies integrating lawyers. As a practitioner in a firm, I think the challenge for us is to figure out good models for integrating the technology, and there are two that I'm aware of that are underway there. One is reliance upon new lawyers with coding experience. You do have recent law school grads that are being trained not only in traditional legal analysis but also in coding. And the second is really a model that's adapted from the IP world. some other specialized worlds where you have a subject matter expert, so a technologist, who would become an employee of the law firm and work and report in sort of a diligence model to the practicing lawyers.
Any other thoughts about the current state of development? So let's say I'm just a practicing attorney. I hear about the smart contract stuff. I want to devise a smart contract for my client. What's the fastest way for me to get into this space?
Okay, if your question, if I understand you, so you're asking about development?
Yeah, let's say I just want to automate a process for a client of mine. They're consistently entering into NDAs, and I want to make it a 2-click process. How do I build that?
Yes.
Just, you know,
yes,
in 5 seconds.
Exactly. We use this proof of concept approach, and every client wants to see how his idea will work. So, and we have no much time to check this idea. So we use tools, special tools. We use Hyperledger Composer, for example, in our practice, which allow us to check any idea for a few days. It's not a few days, for maybe 2-3 weeks. So after that, when we check the idea with the special tools, which allows us to develop more quickly, more easily. After that, clients see how works this idea, and after that, we continue to develop the project, maybe with new tasks, with new vision, with more functionality. This is our approach.
So sort of an iterative process, start with something small, maybe a few lines of code, make sure that works out, sort of dipping your toes in a little bit. I want to ask one more question. I'm going to open it up to the audience, so if you could start maybe thinking about questions for the panelists. But let's put on our futurist hats. It's the year 2030. Skynet has not taken over, so humanity still exists, if you're a Terminator fan. And we wake up in a world where smart contracts exist. And what is the most noticeable difference about this world when we wake up in 2030? And my second question will be, are there still contract lawyers? Or have they been supplanted by code? And let's start with Daniel.
I think, yes, there's still contract lawyers, so all the lawyers in the room can breathe a sigh of relief. But I think in 2030, it's a very different world. By 2030, we will see IoT and smart contracts integrated inherently. So the lights are on in this room. The tenant or landlord's bank account is draining. Lights turn off, bank account stops draining. Turn on the tap, drain your bank account. And that's going to be the way it is. It's going to be real-time monetization of resource use. So whether that's, driving, flying, I think energy is probably the biggest area of implication for blockchain as far as humanity is concerned. But 2030 is also a really far out there date, because blockchain and AI kind of go hand in hand, because AIs really need a central, trustful data source in order for society to trust these AIs. And I believe that we're very close to seeing AIs actually start to issue the first patents. Okay, so I believe that within 5 years, we will see AIs that do the full patent process themselves. They come up with the idea, they do all of the schematics, they write down all of the patent idea, and they file it and they get an approval. That in itself is a scary thing, but that is the future we are entering.
My prediction would be cooperation outside of, greater cooperation outside of our artificial entities. So the formation of corporations and limited liability companies in our jurisdiction will decrease, and instead folks will rely upon DLT and other cooperative mechanisms in order to organize themselves.
When we wake up in the future, I think the smart contracts will work, and they will allow information to move more easily to the recipients. It will take off some centers of administration, some centers of concentration, which do not allow information to go fluently. So smart contracts will change many things in our lives because the information energy products will go to the people more easily.
I'll make some compliment. I think I'll make a bold prediction too, and that in 2030, and probably there will be many different decentralized organizations, the DAOs. So they are all powered by blockchain, but all these organizations are quite differently from the traditional company we see, with the equity and with the consumer. The economic model for token economic will be totally different from what it is today. Let's say the whole economics will be different by then because of the token economic and because of the smart contract behind the whole economic system and the economic model.
So Daniel stole my thunder a little bit. I was also going to push the smart contracts piece into the AI and IoT space because I think that's really going to drive a lot of things. I mean, maybe 2030s rather than 2020s, but I completely agree with you on all of that. But leaving that aside, yes, I think lawyers will be around, partially because I think there's a false equivalence of smart contracts and legal contracts, just because they both have the word contract in their name. They're separate things, and there will still be need for lawyers given the legal contract side of things. That said, I do think that what we now call smart contracts, I don't know if we'll call them that in 12 years, but what we now call smart contracts would be just ubiquitous. It makes too much sense to drive transactions autonomously and synchronously. Just why would we not do that as the technology gets easier and easier? So.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, thank you. I'd like to open up the audience now. So if anybody has a quick question, the gentleman there in the middle, I see a hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to ask you, as lawyers, will there be sort of like any sort of pilot tools so that lawyers can actually generate smart contracts as legal contracts without some sort of arbitrator or somebody in the middle, so that the contract actually executes the will of the two parties in the contract?
Let me paraphrase that question and say it in the microphone. So the question is, will there be compiler tools developed that will allow attorneys to directly, create smart contracts for their clients?
So 3 real quick answers to that. First of all, I think technologically, absolutely, why not have that? I mean, we already have sentiment analysis. It wouldn't be hard for an AI to read through a contract and say, let's translate this over. That said, there's ambiguity and such, so I don't know if we necessarily trust this, which brings us to, I think about just driverless vehicles right now. Already safer in many ways than human-driven vehicles, but we don't trust them because you get in a box and what's going to happen if the program's wrong, if it gets hacked and so on. You can have thousands of fatal car accidents a year driven by humans, and we say, well, that's just the way the world works if they're distracted by texting or asleep or drunk or whatever else. But you have 1 or 2 with computers who say, oh, no, we can't let this come up, this technology go live. So I think the ability to do that will arrive before people's comfort with that. I've forgotten the third thing I was going to say, well, so I'll leave it right there.
I'll fill in a little space as well. For anyone who's interested in the mechanics of building a smart contract, I would encourage you to look at a group called the Agreements Network, which has developed a code-free, free and open source solution for the development of smart contracts. And I haven't toyed around with it yet, but my understanding is it's quite powerful. Again, it's the Agreements Network. Any other thoughts as to whether attorneys and how attorneys can start to use some of these tools directly?
I agree with my colleague that it's going to be easier in the future, and the main reason for that I touched on earlier, and it's because the protocol layer is so deep. So, when we saw Web 2.0 come about, the HTTP protocol had very few points to it, and developers were kind of given an open slate as to how to integrate this protocol. Web 3.0 is much different. The protocol layer is very rigid, and the application layer lacks flexibility due to the rigidity of the protocol layer. So with strong protocols, it's actually harder to screw up in the application layer. So I believe that it will be quite easy for developers to build tools for lawyers and legal counsel to generate these smart contracts on their own.
Makes sense. I think we have time for literally one more question, and in the front row here, yes, please.
Do you anticipate that there's going to be a reduction and possibly, I guess, an elimination of litigation when you start implementing smart contracts?
I'm going to repeat that for the whole group here. Will the adoption of smart contracts lead to a reduction of litigation?
I think so. You know, code, just from a fundamental standpoint, is much easier to interpret than contractual language. So I think the need to litigate smart contracts in the future, we're going to see a reduction compared to traditional contracts. And you know, the case that I cited earlier about the case in Hong Kong, it was very interesting because that set precedent throughout the British Commonwealth. So now a smart contract is more valid than its paper equivalent in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, Britain. We're talking major economic powerhouses in the world. I'm not sure of the state of smart contract litigation in the United States, but if we're not there already, I don't see it being too far down the road.
Will, thoughts on the relative increase or reduction of litigation that might come out of this?
Yeah, I actually have a considerably more negative point of view, and it's based upon my experience with the last wave of technology, if you will. I began practicing before email was in ready use, and certainly it's very commonly used now. So the impact that that's had in the United States is to spawn a whole new scope of litigation and litigation practices around e-discovery. It's a concept that didn't even exist 20 years ago. We're contemplating creating tremendously more data with this technology, and I don't have any reason to believe that it's going to have a different consequence, at least in the U.S., than the last round of technology had. It may reduce the number of transactional lawyers that are required, because conceptually you might need a lawyer only to design a contract initially, and you could rely upon non-lawyers after that. But I'm dubious that it's going to reduce the amount of litigation overall because of the increase in data.
All right, on that cautionary note, I think we'll close out this panel. Thank you very much to the panelists for participating, and thanks everyone in the audience.
right, we're gonna get started here. If everybody could kind of take a seat, quiet down, please, that'd be great. All right, our next panel here is Blockchain Trends, Government, Healthcare, and Insurance. We've got a fantastic group of people. I'd like to go ahead and start with introductions. I'm Colleen Sullivan, CEO of CMT Digital. If you guys could go down the line, that would be great.
My name is Xiaoqun Zhang, and the president of FinTech for Good and also Blockchain Frontier Group. And we are a blockchain incubator accelerator investor. And we have, in the past, incubated quite a number of blockchain company, and we also put our dollar behind quite some interesting company. And we are launching our next acceleration program, which will be a 10-week program, both in Washington, D.C. and also in Beijing. And if you're interested in getting involved, contact me. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Mike Wands. I'm the former CTO for the state of Illinois. I had the unique honor and privilege to be part of the team for 3 years here in Illinois as we put in place and launched the Illinois Blockchain Initiative. And I'm very excited to be here. I'm currently Chief Technologist and Client Officer for Payit. Payit is a Kansas City-based digital government platform that is leveraging blockchain.
Hi everyone, I'm Dima Alisa, and I'm a serial techpreneur here, delighted to be amongst these incredible folks. I am currently representing the world of healthcare in terms of data interoperability and 3D printing, visualization, etc. I'm actually president, CEO of Vismed 3D, but as part of that journey, I recognize that 3D printing can't be a silo business. And when I met my co-founder, Abigail Watson, with Symptomatic, we recognize that there's a tremendous opportunity for every healthcare company to benefit and leverage interoperability of data flow, creating harmonization and fluidity across the ecosystem. And blockchain is largely part of that. So I'm delighted to be here and look forward to an engaged conversation.
Hello everybody, I'm Evan Singh Luthra. I'm a good friend of George. Thanks for having me here. I was at the first IBC Congress too. I do a lot of things. I'm a parallel entrepreneur and angel investor. We have coffee shops, we have vodka companies, we have incubators. We invest in over 100 different tech startups. In the blockchain space, we own a crypto investment bank, we have blockchain schools, we have blockchain training academies. We've successfully done over 5 ICOs, raised over $100 million. The first ICO we did with the former president of a European Union country as a chief advisor, already 10x return to our investors. We're focused on security tokens right now. We're one of our companies high outside. Come visit and have a chat. Pleasure to be here.
Hello, my name is Eric Vasquez. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at the Office of the City Clerk here in Chicago. We've created basically what is the analog version of an ID, and we're looking at blockchain, and thankfully for the Illinois Blockchain Initiative, they've done a lot of the blocking and tackling, so we've really leveraged a lot of the knowledge that they've accumulated since their inception.
Hi, I'm Sean O'Kelly. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the State of Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. And so, similar to everyone up here, we get involved in blockchain really for 2 reasons. Government in general, there are certain use cases that we're exploring for government in general, and then my agency in particular, financial regulation specifically. We regulate all the lending, money transmission in the state, so we get involved in cryptocurrency. So we get involved in blockchain conversation for those reasons too. So for both of those, we find ourselves in kind of the middle of this blockchain conversation.
Great, thank you. All right, so I thought we would go ahead and kind of dive right into trends that you're seeing, and then we can cover healthcare, insurance, and government. So it'd be great, again, just to kind of go down the line, and any specific trends that you're seeing in your specific industry that you can share would be great.
Yeah, and so for us, that's because we are in the incubation investment space. That's the first #1 trend is really from the investment, and we are seeing that ICO go up and down, and also, but in general, we see that the money, much more capital are entering into this space, especially from the institutional investor. And in the past, that it's really that the crypto folks who are investing in crypto projects. But now that's large financial institutions and also high net worth individuals, and all just started to requesting their family office or their fund manager to just looking at this space. So then we are actually looking at the rising of investment globally, and of course from that we have several key markets where we see more deals than others. But in general, this is one of very interesting phenomena that's comparing blockchain with any other type of emerging technology or general purpose technology. And this is a technology which is the most democratic in the early stage, meaning that if you go to Africa, if you go to Southeast Asia, if you go to US, if you go to Israel, and all have amazing projects. So that's very different from all the other like big data, machinery, robotic technology. And the second trend, we see that the adoption of mainstream organizations started from this year. And before this, and we always just using this 3-stage to just look at blockchain. Before 2015, that we see it's really there's no blockchain, there's only Bitcoin. And after that, till 2017, that's where that we have a project like Ethereum and other type of blockchain technology, public ledger become available. And then we see the emerging of large industry alliance, blockchain alliance, which drive a lot of interest. But at this time, there's a lot of good concept, but minimal pilots or POC. And then now that's from 2018 and or later 2017 till now, that's we really see that major industry players who started to adopt it. And the last one I want to mention is really from the policy side, that we have established this central bank blockchain advisory group, where that's we work with central banks and also policymakers from different countries, and to understand their concerns and also what are in their plate. They try to use blockchain to address. And in 2007, just 1 year, in 2017, that if you just go to central bank, go to department or ministries or departments, there's probably one person like a CTO or CIO who understand it, who are heard about it, but it has nothing to do with their operation. But they all just heard it as a news piece of the Bitcoin price. But now that if you just go to central banks or can go to departments or ministries in different sectors, everyone have a blockchain pilots or blockchain lab or blockchain initiative, which means that they although have a lot of concerns and a lot of questions yet to be answered, but the major players, the government officials, policymakers are looking at this space in a very accelerated speed. Yeah.
When we had the opportunity to take a look at, from the government perspective, what needed to be done to really enable blockchain to be effective, we launched the Illinois Blockchain Initiative, and Colleen was one of our advisors, and Cab Morris and Jennifer O'Rourke, and I know John Merkovic's out there, Lexi Promodoris and Mike Zaleski. You'll hear from those guys later today. We came together and really took a look at what do we need to do from a government perspective to really help make this, and it was really nascent technology at that point, usable for improving the delivery of services from government to citizens. And we went down the path and we had 3 goals. So the number 1 goal was we wanted to make sure that we improved the delivery of government services. Number 2 is we wanted to create an ecosystem that would help us build out those capabilities of technology. And then number 3 is we wanted to create a friendly regulatory environment by not over-regulating, right? We wanted to create guidelines and approaches, and we were very successful in publishing a legislative task force report that highlighted where blockchain is and how it can be used in government. That's available to anybody if you're interested. It's out on the Illinois.gov site, and it's a very comprehensive report that talks about the opportunity. And I want to use that word opportunity, and I want to highlight that because that's where we are with blockchain. The technology is still somewhat nascent, but it has moved from concept and ideas and proof of concept and use cases into some enterprise successes. As we work with the major vendors out there, as we work with IBM, we work with Microsoft, we work with the folks who are really trying to drive platform aspects, it's giving us a foundation. All of us in this room and out in the hallways, we're talking about these new solutions and capabilities, but really this environment and the whole ecosystem of where blockchain is just emerging. And so I think that that's really critical to highlight because the promise of blockchain hasn't been realized yet. Right? Let's think about where we're at and what the opportunity is in front of us. And as a technologist, it's very exciting to see where we're at and see what needs to be done. And some of the things that we can do as we navigate, as we talk about this, right? As I usually get up and talk about blockchain, I'm like, the best thing that ever happened to blockchain was Bitcoin, and the worst thing that ever happened to blockchain was Bitcoin, right? I mean, it's this whole thing of the cryptocurrency aspect of being one of the first real examples, but it showed the true promise of immutable data, right, of bits and bytes of bursty data stored in different ways that were not changeable in a system of record. That fundamentally is going to give us the opportunity to improve the trusted transactional aspect of completing business and doing it electronically in a way that's more secure than it is today. So the promise is there, the progress we're making, this is us, we're all in this together, we have to stay diligent and keep working at it. And the use cases are starting to show success. And so as we talk through today, and Sean will highlight some ideas and some of the concepts on the Illinois Blockchain Initiative, we went into government and we found 30 different potential use cases. We narrowed that down to 5 different use cases in 5 business segments with 5 technology vendors on 5 different platforms trying to test out some of these technologies. And the results were extremely promising.
Well, I have to say, as a bona fide technologist, knowing that Illinois is leading the way in blockchain has been transformative and makes us all very proud. So I just want to plug for you and that initiative. It's pretty amazing. So, exactly. So in the world of healthcare, it's profoundly a valuable tool. And here's some of the trends that have been changing the landscape altogether. Largely due to the transition from fee-based to value-based care, which means we have to measure things differently, which means hospitals are held to a different standard, a different metric of how they are delivering care, whether there are readmissions, whether they're saving money, a lot of pressured points that they have to be able to quantify and really measure. And so one of the drivers isn't just the overall care, but it's tied to the level of care, and the quality of care is now tied to something called the MACRA reimbursement scale. And hospitals will not get reimbursed if they don't have the infrastructure that allows them to demonstrate and properly quantify their adoption to that standard and that requirement from the government. So that's a lot of the things. Another area that's rather interesting is this tug of war between system providers and personal individuals or citizenry, as you referenced it, and who really owns the data, and how do we access the data? And so systems now are the manufacturers like the Epics, the Cerners, the Allscripts are being challenged with who owns the data and how do I get access to my data. So things like a digital wallet could be one of the solutions that allows individuals to gain access to their information. And so, for example, our company, Symptomatic, has developed this longitudinal view of your personal health care, which doesn't really exist, but has the ability to really deliver and liberate information in a new way through this democratization of information through blockchain solutions. Thinking about other questions that we all have to deal with, either on our own or for our parents and families, how do we manage and navigate the end-of-life care, the advanced directives? Who has permission to tell my treatment providers what level of, terminal care or advanced directives I want? Who gets the decision rights? Who gets the final directives to impose on my treatment if I'm incapacitated? A blockchain solution could, and is already being used with our clients at UPenn and Duke, because they recognize that this is an area of tremendous concern and really requires advanced thinking and planning for the families, so that you're not caught in this, gap where you have to straddle between who is really governing and driving my life and my welfare. And so I think there's a lot of use cases that are becoming quite well recognized, and knowing that blockchain is a way to liberate information has been uniquely valuable, I think, to the healthcare system, that we can measure and we can reward financially through a system, that we can provide access to individuals as well as treatment providers, and creating that kind of unified, authorized data model is really a profound way. And Eric's going to talk about the municipal ID, but that is a beautiful example of how multiple blockchains can be implemented. And in our experience, there's largely 4 top blockchains, and I can talk about that at another time, but that we've really recognized and have applications in different ways. So it's a lot of great trends that are empowering individuals and healthcare providers in measurable ways that will deliver a higher level of quality care.
Can I just I'm sorry to go out of order, and you can have all my time in my next question, but because I regularly get asked from a technology perspective, where do you think blockchain is going to have the biggest impact? And I usually get booed off the stage when I'm at a finance event and I say healthcare, because healthcare is the area, if we can get to the point where we can own our own personal health record, it's going to make a difference, because as you know, we all know, interoperability is really hard. In the US, those folks outside the US where you have single payer systems, it's a little bit different. In the US where there's multiple payer systems, healthcare is just filled with fraud. And it's not on purpose. A lot of it's just the way that the systems have been developed over time. But if you have your financial records, let's say your financial data gets breached, you know about it, right? You are aware when that financial record gets breached. 1% of all financial transactions are fraudulent. When you get to healthcare in the US, 10% of all transactions are fraudulent. And if your healthcare record is breached, if people are sending claims on your behalf, you have no idea, none whatsoever. And it's causing us major issues as a country. The lack of interoperability of data is really causing the increase in the percent of GDP that's being used for healthcare. That is where we have an opportunity. We need to own our own healthcare records, but we can't just own, it has to be interoperable from the industry perspective. So sorry, I had to jump in on that. So.
It's definitely interesting. I can add on to that, because one of my companies, we're doing a proof of concept with the Dubai government right now to put all the health records on the blockchain. The way we're doing it, for us, it is not about saving money, it's about saving lives. Because at the end of the day, right now, if you go to the governments and you ask them, hey, can you tell me why this disease happened? Or can you even tell me how many percentage of the people have this type of blood type? They can't tell that because they have paper records. I go to a lot of the Dominican Republic. I was there just a couple of months ago, and they just burned 50 years of medical records. It was all paper. They didn't even say they just burned away 50 years of medical records. If you think about how many people lose lives, if that data could have been in the blockchain, you could have prevented so many further human trials you probably have to do to collect the same data that was there. Coming to the question, what trends? I've spoken at about 25 conferences in the last 120 days in blockchain in about 10 countries. And the major trends I see is adoption, that there's a lot of adoption happening. Governments, companies, people, the community, right? End of the day, blockchain and crypto is about the community. we finally have a way to give power back to the people. Distributed governance, distributed decentralized governments. That's what really excites me about this industry. I've seen technology come and go. I was very early into the mobile app space. I was one of the first 100 guys to make apps for iPhone. And I've seen the industry grow from where it is. And blockchain is just a technology. End of the day, it will come and go. Estonian government actually was using blockchain before blockchain. They were using something called hash-linked time-stamping technology to build government systems right before the Bitcoin white paper gave us blockchain. So for me, the real beauty here is that the idea of decentralized systems, that's what really excites me. That's the major trend I see. We're already seeing companies like, I've invested in a company called Hashgraph, which is a different type of DLT. It's not a blockchain. So I really like blockchain for it. It moves the community, and that's what really excites me about it. From the investments perspective, you're seeing trends like a lot more regulation. We did 5 utility tokens before. Now we don't touch utility tokens anymore. We're moving completely towards security tokens, which are fully regulated by the government. They're checking, they're making sure people are not going to lose their money. End of the day, the cryptocurrency industry still drives the blockchain industry. That's the one that most people, majority of people get excited about. And it's no point arguing against that. So as we see more adoption and more regulated forms of cryptocurrencies, more payment tokens, more security tokens, that will drive more people to invest in it. I mean, the ETF is a big topic, right? Trends from the government space. The governments are going in from every angle, as far as I see. I mean, we are opening a blockchain school in Dominican Republic with the government involved. They're training people. So another key thing is all these governments want to use blockchain, but governments don't work with people unless they are all fully wedded, and they need degrees. And I don't have formal education. I didn't go to college or something. But you can't really do a job for the government until you have a degree. And most experts in the blockchain space are 20 years old, right? I'm 23. And the Dominican government actually gave me an honorary PhD in blockchain just so I could advise for them. So
I was wondering about that in your bio.
Yeah, so they gave me honorary PhD because officially I couldn't work for them unless I had some sort of degree.
So, give me a bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
I heard that.
So I mean, there's 15 jobs for every blockchain developer, but when you start looking for jobs for the government, there's like way more because the governments can't hire you. And so we're seeing a lot of trends there. We opened already 2 blockchain schools, blockchain centers, working with multiple governments to open more so that people can actually build. A lot of these projects, they don't have developers behind them, right? You're seeing all these cryptocurrencies, hundreds of millions in market cap, billions. There's only 5 guys working on actually building something. So the reality of the industry is that we're seeing progress. We're seeing more how do you say, processes come into place. So the governments can start working with people to start implementing solutions. So industries like healthcare and insurance can start implementing solutions. It's an exciting space.
Good. While I can't issue any honorary degrees, what I can promise you and the people in the about what's going on. One case that we're looking at particularly closely is the city of Zug that is using Uport's, or the Ethereum's Uport app and actually issuing digital IDs. Recently they've had an election, I think in July, where the 200 people who have these IDs used that system to place a vote. And to me, that's extremely transformative. I don't think that we're yet there in the city of Chicago, but I would say that in our office, we definitely have the tools, we definitely have a platform to change the way that Chicagoans in particular interact with the city of Chicago.
All right, trends. So I'll talk about a little bit of what I'm seeing from the government side, and then a little bit I'll touch on financial services, financial regulation. So in government, just to kind of follow up on what Mike was saying and what Eric was saying, I think the big thing there is really decentralized ID. So the initial work that was done by with the Illinois Blockchain Initiative to identify some of those key use cases, that was great initial work. I think what we're doing now is we're saying, okay, we need to take that and now really hone in on one thing and really try to do that well. Because that's so foundational to a lot of the use cases that were originally identified. So when it comes to distributing government services, that decentralized ID or digital ID on the blockchain, whatever you want to call it, is the thing that we're trying to hone in on. So that's going to open all kinds of doors in terms of our ability to, citizens' ability and businesses to interact with the government, whether it's performing simple service transactions like changing your address, to any kind of disbursements like unemployment benefits or Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security or other type of retirement benefits, being able to identify an individual, their representation in the digital space, so they can interact through online channels, is going to significantly change the way we all interact with government and hopefully improve it quite a bit. But at the same time, make sure that government is providing resources to the right places. The kind of like holy grail, so to speak, if you want to call it that, would be voting. I think we've all wondered why we can't vote online today. And the short answer is because even though we have good security, or really good security today, using things like IDs and passwords and two-factor authentication and all that stuff, you still can't be, in spite of all that, you still can't be certain that the entity interacting on the other end of the computer is actually the person or business that they're supposed to be. So that decentralized ID is so key to being able to change the way we interact with government. I think that's the first trend. The second thing I'll mention, if you're not aware, there's something right now, just speaking to the environment in Illinois, there's an act right now called the Blockchain Technology Act that's in the General Assembly. I believe it's continuing to go through its committee iterations, but you can find it online, you can look it up and Google it. Read through it. If you're in support of it, reach out to your representatives and senators and let them know. Because that bill, and don't quote me on this, but I believe it would be the first bill in the country that would legitimize the use of blockchain at the state level. So essentially what the bill does, and I'm not a lawyer, so don't quote me on this, but essentially what the bill does is it legitimizes the use of smart contracts in the state. So it essentially says that if you engage in a contract on the blockchain, it's just as valid. It can't be argued in court that it's not a valid contract because it was on the blockchain. So it has other stuff in the bill too, but that's kind of like the punchline, I think. So you can Google that. You can find it. I believe it's listed on the Illinois General Assembly public website, and you can learn more about that. So that's government. Financial services. What we're seeing is, particularly around lending and money transmission, that's where a lot of the hot topics are, or a lot of the activity is in the financial services and financial regulation space. I think for us, it's really about compliance. So in my role, leading the technology organization for the agency, I'm trying to not only figure out how to bring us current, but also how to set us up for the future. And I think a big part of that is compliance. So we in money transmission, we license the PayPals and the Venmos of the world, and as Coinbase comes to Chicago, we're going to license them as a money transmitter, not as a currency exchange, as a money transmitter. And what that means, though, is that when I say compliance, we by law have to go in, the department has to go in and examine an institution for a number of things, but particularly for its viability and making sure that it's working within the law. The way that we do that today is very manual. It's essentially, that exam process is essentially an audit. How we do that in the future could totally change that compliance, those compliance steps. You could totally reduce, you can reduce quite a bit of compliance costs, I think, if you engage in a different way. And it would be totally different. Instead of it being a thing where we show up 18 or 24 months after the fact and do an exam, we might be able to do those things in more real-time kind of a fashion. So when we're talking about lending and looking out for things like anti-predatory lending, or like I said, money transmission, just wanting to know what we need to know about those institutions and that they're operating within the law, that whole compliance around that, I think, is where I'm seeing the opportunity in financial regulation.
Thanks, Sean. Dima, you mentioned 4 different types of blockchains. I'd be curious to know what you're seeing there and kind of the mix with permission, public, how that's looking.
Absolutely. We've actually developed on all 4 of these. Big Chain, which is likely the best application, is supply chain. So some might be aware that we have this opioid crisis, and managing our prescription drugs is a problem. We see blockchain and Big Chain as a potential viable solution therein. Ethereum obviously is something that everybody's talking about, and it's got more commercial applications, could potentially leverage, you know, over-the-counter, not financial applications, but in terms of gym memberships, any sort of kind of community engagement services that would be outside of that would be more marketing driven in my mind. There's also Hyperledger, which we're currently using in a couple of healthcare institutions and applications. I guess that's probably been our strongest suit in terms of what we developed. And then the IPFS, the Interplanetary File System, which is probably very commonly referred to from the Napster era, the sharing distributed access across different systems for different applications. But those are the 4 that we've kind of seen bubble up to the surface and that we're really leveraging in our projects and developments. There's obviously a ton more, but those are the ones that we've really landed on in terms of key development. They're really applications to do everything from fraud detection to governance management, personal identification. You know, I referenced digital wallet as a construct that has applications in healthcare, and truly, it's those tools that are capable of changing the way things work and how efficiently they work. And I think that's the real opportunity. For example, the Office of the National Coordinator, as a governmental agency, is driving the development of a blockchain national provider directory. So imagine that you've got now this database that every system, every hospital can be referenced and looked up and shared in a universal fashion, that they are credentialed and authorized to do business as they are. And similarly, doctors. Credentialing is probably one of the biggest issues that plagues the healthcare system. You know, you have a doctor that wants to practice and do a procedure at a hospital that he wasn't currently employed in, and how do you validate and verify their credentialing so that they can perform it and get the right authorizations? That's the kind of thing where we can leverage those kind of databases that house the current real information and potentially build smart contracts that could execute those kinds of things. One more really interesting idea is the continuity of care. So I mentioned longitudinal records and your own personal health history that you can carry, but state to state, there are different regulations. The jurisprudence really has not been tested in a way that I think we could see blockchain helping to solve and overcome with the implementation of smart contracts, kind of negotiating everybody's different regulations. You've got the rule engine, and you've got some way to really help you take your medical records if you need treatment, not only across states, but potentially across the globe. And I think that's really the power that is the potential that we alluded to.
All right, so we're in the midst of a bit of a crypto asset bear market right now. Evan, I'd love to start with you. I'm just curious if you see that impacting any of the deal flow you're seeing from an investment standpoint. And then I'd be curious for anyone else to jump in, if it's slowing down any development you're seeing in the space.
I think this is good because it matures the market. End of the day, you have to understand, I mean, this bear market is less than a few months old, right? You don't make decisions based on a few months of data. if you compare annual returns, you're still in a lot, very good. I mean, Bitcoin is the best asset class by far in the whole decade. And this whole industry is less than a decade. It's just less than 10 years old. So yes, it's a good market. We see a lot of adoption, but these highs and lows what creates the high, and that's how you create more adoption. So what we're eventually going to see is a lot more people find out about it. It's going to go up again. It's going to be more news. A lot more people buy into it. But what we really lack is the regulatory part, right? There's a lot of cool companies trying to build a lot of cool products, but they can't launch because the regulations don't allow it. I mean, just look at the industries here, healthcare and insurance, right? I mean, insurance is such a big industry that blockchain can impact in so many different ways. Right now, everybody in insurance is packaged together, sold the same kind of insurance package, same premium. I don't drive for 3 years. Last 2 years I haven't driven, right? But if I go and get insurance for my car, I'm probably paying a very high premium anyways, because I'm young. So it doesn't really relate. Now, if all the stuff I've been driving, it was actually on the blockchain, if my friends would go and claim, hey, this guy doesn't drive, so his premium should be very little. So if my friends could authenticate me on the blockchain, then it's a whole new industry you're creating there, right? You're personalizing everybody. So there's a lot. I've invested in companies in all kinds of sectors, and I'm seeing a lot of all these people building cool products and doing cool things. But one, we gotta give them time. It's only so much time we're giving them, and we expect a lot of results. It takes time to build great companies. And two, we gotta give them more regulatory approval to actually go and test their products and build that. I think the guys here are working on that, as we see. I mean, I work with 4 different governments, and I've talked to a lot more globally, and everybody's trying to do something. From an investor's perspective, I'm a long-term guy. I'm not buying and just selling, and I'm not doing ups and downs. I don't invest to make a buck tomorrow, right? I'm investing in long-term value. If I see some people working on something, then I invest, and I know that's going to pay off a few years from now. And the deal flow is actually, it's getting lower, but it's higher quality deal flow now. Because you're seeing, like I said before, you're seeing security tokens, which cannot be a scam. You're seeing all kinds of payment tokens. And people are putting the effort to be more responsible and accountable. Just for the last few months, we saw a phase there where everybody thought they'll do an ICO, right? Everybody's thinking, I can do an ICO, I can raise 10 million. I mean, that was crazy. But now we're seeing way more quality deal flow, and that's better for the market.
Yeah, if I could just make a quick comment on that. So, to Evan's point, so what we're seeing is, so I don't know if this affects the investment into cryptocurrency per se, but hopefully it will improve confidence over time. But as you have these cryptocurrencies that don't necessarily have any particular asset or anything behind them, that's where you're starting to see some of those kind of falling off a little bit and really having a little more trouble. What we're starting to see is opportunities, and I can't go too much into it, but being part of the government, but we have companies that are interested in ideas and are pursuing ideas where there's actual assets behind any kind of token that they're creating.
I have to stop you there because you're wrong in saying these currencies don't have assets. The IP is the asset. The only thing is the value of the IP is falling a lot because the IP doesn't get used. Every cryptocurrency out there has an asset.
Well, we may disagree on that. That's okay. And I would disagree with you that in some of those cases I would actually say there is no value behind it. Sorry, I disagree. But okay, fair enough. So, but the bottom line though is that I think the ones that are going to emerge, if I were to guess, I would say that it's the ones that actually have real value behind them, whether it's software value or whether it's, so like on Ethereum where you can actually build software behind on the network, or whether it's real estate or some other kind of asset that's behind some other kind of collateral that you can put up that's behind the issuance of a certain token. I think that's I think the trend I'm seeing in terms of where this is going to go next around the cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I agree with you when you say that. So we're seeing a huge trend in tokenization of old assets like real estate and like gold. So that's happening, but you can't discount that people are working on something, building a product. That is an asset. I mean, look at the last 10 years, right? I mean, oil is the biggest asset. I'm talking about the product they're building. So all these technology companies going out, they're building some sort of an app, they're building some sort of platform.
Right, and I said that when you're building software, that's
so that's the asset, right?
All right, so we're going to have this disagreement later during lunch. We have some entertainment for you.
Yeah, so, when we just look at whether the market fluctuation is impacted the market itself, and we first have to understand the spectrum of investors who we are talking about. And there are always traders out there trading so of course the fluctuation really just impacted their investment strategy. Then we have, the traditional, like Job Act type of crowdfunding investor, no matter you are just using Job Title 2 or Title 3, that's your credit or non-credit, but your participation of that is basically build upon your understanding of the platform technology. Then we just go more toward the institutional investors, no matter from VC or from the PE fund, and also just now we have more larger institutions like the pension fund who also just are looking at this as a part of the asset. So for different type of investors, market fluctuation really impacting very differently. And for example, from us, that when we take this VC type of approach, looking at this market, and long term is always the strategy. However, that when we just look at the argument between the two of them is kind of interesting, representing the crypto side and the traditional investor side. That many of the traditional investors, that if you just give them a token or a software which are built, then the token they claim that when you build a product, blockchain-based product, then you already becoming an asset itself. Doesn't make sense for many of the traditional asset managers. But of course, that now many more asset managers started to just looking at what you said, that the token-based asset or the asset-backed tokens, this is becoming neutral way. But in general, when we just look at the value it created by the blockchain technology, and for us that we see three things which intrinsically that is valuable. Number one is that the new process. With blockchain, without blockchain, that we are having a totally new process. Whether this new process matters or not, is that valuable or not. And we give you example that when I was in Kenya, that the government, the policeman just because I look different from all the Kenyans. And when I just was there, and then the person the policeman came to me and tried to bully me and asked me to just give him money. And I don't want to give him the money. No, I didn't. But the funny thing is that the reason is that I don't know whether they are true policemen or not. They don't have any badge or anything. So then after that experience, I recommended to the government and said that, can you issue a policeman passport if I'm a foreigner or any citizen? If we just scan the badge, we know that this is a true policeman, then I will be cooperative. If not, then I don't. So then I will not risk the risk that they will take away my passport and then bully me. So in this, that if we have a blockchain-based new process, and this process has not been installed before, and everything changed around it, and that has its value, and for many sectors. The second part is the cost-saving part from blockchain-based system. When we just look at from traditional banking, any banks, 70% of their costs go to risk management. Meaning is that you are who you are, you own what you own, and all that has being done from one step to another, and all we call them as cost. Then finally, financial service can only be offered to minimal group of people. So if we use a blockchain-based solution, which we just take that cost out, then the cost saving itself matters, because that's for many of the large companies and even for government, looking at many government-related blockchain solutions, cost saving is one of the key components. So that's the second one. The third one is really the system resilience. Thinking about, we have a lot of CIO, CTO here, and when we just look at a system, just an IT system, and
Bitcoin, when it was launched almost 10 years ago till now, there's no single one-time downtime from system resilience. And many of the current system can learn from this. And if we can build a secure and also the privacy is properly being protected and a highly resilient system. And that system itself definitely has its value. Let's go back to your point that if you can build such a system which either reduce cost or just design new process or just create a new way that can just move the flow differently. And then, of course, you can take this coin as an asset. But if you only create a coin, you said that it's becoming asset itself. It's not, because it doesn't add value to anybody.
I mean, let me just add in there, right? Let me give you, so the 10 years ago, the top 5 biggest companies in the world were all oil companies. Real asset, $500 trillion industry, crypto is not even $500 billion. But now, the 5 biggest companies are Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, Google. All tech companies, majority of the value is made up because of the technology, which is the code, which is the asset that they have. And ICOs allow us now a way to actually, that's the real beauty of this industry. It's aligning people to be able to invest in companies like this. Now, if you were thinking about Uber, right, why do it work? The idea is that there's 3 stakeholders involved in the company. It's the owner, it's the management, and it's the user. The user wants the best product for the cheapest amount. The owner wants to make the most money. And the management wants to give the best product while making the most salary and keeping the owners happy. ICOs allow us to do that. And that's why the tokens have value. I mean, if you had a token for Uber now, you would never use Lyft. Because you know that more token, if you use Uber and you have Uber tokens, the value of Uber is going to go up. So then you're aligning incentives for the company and the user. That's why ICOs are such a great industry, and that's why I've been an angel investor for a long time. I'm probably not going to have a good deal flow eventually because everybody will be raising money through the ICOs. Nobody will need to go to VCs. The whole VC industry is probably going to be diminished if the ICO model takes off, which it is. So I think it's a new way to look at assets that we really have to discuss.
Cool. Well, I apologize because we're out of time. They gave me like an impossible task with 6 really incredible people in 45 minutes. We should have had 6 hours, so you guys could like accumulate everything they have in their brains. But thank you so much, and I apologize. You definitely need to talk to Eric about the City Key program. I didn't even get to ask you about it, but it's really a remarkable program, and the whole point about being inclusive in the city and welcoming everybody in, that is definitely the way that's viewed, and I really encourage everybody to talk with them about it. And just talk with everybody up here more. So, thank you. Thank you.
All right, so just special thanks to all our panel members and our moderator. It was a lot of great conversations and a lot of work. But right now we're going to transition into lunch. So basically, you guys can go out to the lobby area, grab your lunchbox. You're welcome to bring it back in here, eat it. But try to be back in here around 1:15 because that's when we're going to have the next presentation. All right, thank you.